Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to discuss what the future of privacy looks like, both from a standpoint of where businesses are using data and also how government is using data, how it's being collected, the different laws and legislation that are being passed, how things are going to look kind of with AI coming onto the scene because there's been some stuff going on with that. I'm seeing new developments come up. Just a few days ago, I saw some new stuff come up regarding AI use. And so we're going to go through all of that. And I'm just going to briefly touch on why this matters. I'm not going to go into a big long explanation of this because there seems to be two camps when it comes to privacy. There's the people that say things like, well, I don't have anything to hide. I'm fine with everyone looking through my shit. And then there are those that say, well, I don't have anything to hide, but it's no one's damn business what my emails or my text messages or phone calls or anything like that are. And of course, if you go up to one of these people that say, oh, well, privacy doesn't actually matter. And it's like, okay, well, how about you show everyone your emails? Then, well, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, so you don't want to actually be showing people your private business because that's your private business. It's not everyone else's business. Anyway, I'm not going to go into a big long tangent on that. We are just going to go ahead and get started. So we'll go ahead and start back with 2016, which is when the GDPR passed. Now, GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. This is a law that was passed in the European Union, and it's got several different aspects to it. First of all, it has things like the European citizens have the right to find out what information is being held on them by these private companies. So think something like Facebook or Instagram or something like that. Well, like those are two of the same companies, but Facebook, Google, any of those companies, the legislation allows them a path to be able to find out what information is being held on them. It also sets regulation for increasing standards for things like data security, because what's happening is a lot of these companies that get hacked, for the people that follow the IT world, I mean, it seems like we're hearing about every few weeks, every month at this point, we're hearing about some company that got hacked and a bunch of data got stolen. So it covers a bunch of different aspects, and it also covers things like people being able to get a hold of these companies and saying, hey, I'm a European Union citizen. I am making this request that you delete all private information that you're holding on me, whether it's things like phone number, email, name, whatever the case is, where they have to just clear it out completely. I'm going to go more into that in detail. But this is kind of what kickstarted the whole thing, was people were really getting upset with their data getting leaked and all of this data brokering stuff that's going on, which has gotten completely out of control. And so a lot of people started taking notice of that, especially people here in America, because when this law came out, and for the following couple of years, I was following this thing pretty closely. And a lot of people here in America were like, wow, that's actually a pretty nice law for their citizens. We should get something similar. And we have finally started to see the slow uphill battle progress of being able to get more privacy rights, but there's wins in some areas and some losses that are coming up in other areas, which I will get more into that here pretty soon. Now, the thing with the GDPR is it actually does have some teeth when it's used. And what I mean by this is there are companies that are being held responsible for these violations of the GDPR, but it's not really as effective as some people might think. And I don't know if that's just the bureaucracy. I don't know if there's just a bunch of red tape within the EU governments, like within the individual countries. I'm not exactly 100% sure how the EU legislation works because I'm not a European Union citizen. I imagine their court system is probably in some way similar to America, where the individual countries, like where they would have some say in it, kind of like a state here in America would have some say in how things like this are done. So I don't know if there's a bunch of red tape getting caught up here, because what I've seen, and I've seen this come up numerous times in places like these Reddit boards, like privacy Reddit boards, is, hey, I sent a GDPR notice. I'll go over that here pretty soon. But I sent like a GDPR notice to this company. I asked them to delete my data, and they are refusing. They haven't got back to me. Or they're asking for something like a photo ID to verify that it actually is me before they delete any of my data, which that's a whole bunch of bullshit. Like I said, I'll get more into that soon. But there is actually some effectiveness with the GDPR. Now, some of it doesn't work as well, and I think part of it was this was the initial piece of legislation. So when this initially came out, you have to think that a lot of people that work on laws like this aren't necessarily the most tech-minded people that are out there. And then there's also the fact that people are always going to try and find loopholes around this stuff. So when I'm saying that some of this doesn't work as well, an example of that is these cookie consent notices. Now, these are actually being worked on, which I'm also going to cover this soon. because this was something that was covered under the Data Services Act that just recently passed in the European Union. So they are working on fixing some of this stuff. And so here's how you can actually put some of this stuff to use. So like I said, there's a template out there. So if you're a European Union citizen, and about a third of my audience watches from Europe, by the way, I've got a huge audience over in the European Union. If you do want to take advantage of this, like let's say you made an account with someone like Facebook or one of these other big companies, and you're like, you know what, I want them to get rid of my data. I don't want them selling it or holding on to it anymore. There's things out there. You can find these if you do a Google search for a GDPR template letter. Then what you do is you just replace the things in there that you need it to save for your specific circumstances, and you send it to a specific email address for these companies. So Facebook, for example, they should have like a specific email that you can send in saying, hey, I don't know if it'd be like GDPR at meta.com or whatever, but there's a place that you send these template letters to saying, hey, I'm a European Union citizen. I'm requesting that you delete my data. And by the way, these companies do have to comply with this stuff. And if you're running into issues where this is not happening, again, I'm not familiar with the EU legislation or the court system over there or anything like that, but I believe there is a system set up for recourse for people over there where they can set up like contact with some legislative body or enforcement body and saying, hey, that these guys haven't taken care of this. Can you help me out with this? Now, when it comes to stateside, so when we're talking about the United States, a few years ago, there was the California Consumer Privacy Act. This was I would say it's a cousin of the GDPR. That's not exactly like this, but California kind of followed in similar footsteps, saying, hey, we think that people should have some privacy rights, that these companies shouldn't just be able to start collecting all these notices. Some people might have noticed this so for example, I really like the Metal Gear Solid series, and when you go and play the Metal Gear Solid 5 game, so after the CCPA was released, when you go open up Metal Gear Solid 5, let's say you go make a new save because it'll make you go through the end user license agreement and all that stuff. They actually ended up adding in, and this is just an example, there's other companies that did it, but Konami added this in where it says something like, okay, if you're a California resident and you want data that's held on you being deleted, contact us or whatever the hell. It's been a while since I looked at it because it's been a while since I played MGS5, but then this stuff also started coming up on things like websites where it'd say, oh, if you're a California consumer, here's your Privacy Rights Act, and here's how you can get a hold of us to have information deleted. So this kind of kickstarted things and people really started taking notice of this. Now, California has improved on this legislation, and they just recently have passed something. It's called the California Privacy Rights Act. This is an upgraded version of the CCPA. Now, there's other states that are following in those footsteps, and it's slow. Things take forever to move here, at least in the US, because a lot of times stuff like legislation like this typically is going to happen at the state level. I don't know that we'll ever see legislation like this happen at the federal level, just because I'm not going to go into a big rant, but we are the United Corporations of America, it seems like, instead of the United States of America, but that's a rant for another time. But so there's different pieces of legislation that are coming up, like the Colorado Privacy Act, the Connecticut Data Privacy Act, the Utah Consumer Privacy Act, and the Virginia Consumer Data Privacy Act. And like I said, I don't think we'll ever see anything for national legislation, because if my US audience would understand where I'm going with this, that it seems like legislation that comes up in the state side is always in favor of business being able to fuck the consumer. I'm not going to get into a political thing. This is stuff that I've seen come from both sides of the aisle. I'm not a political person. This is just stuff that I've noticed, that it seems like in America, consumers don't really get all that great of protection. But again, it's a rant for another video. Now, other states are very likely to follow. And when I was doing research for this video, I didn't see anything that was really active yet, but I imagine over the coming years, especially because we're finally starting to see some stuff with AI. So one of the things I'm seeing a lot is people are really concerned about their privacy with AI, because AI is hoovering up a bunch of data. Reddit, by the way, just signed so part of their IPO is they've signed an agreement they are now going to train all of the user created data on an AI system. So an AI is going to come through, vacuum up all of the data that's in people's posts on Reddit, and use that to train further an LLM. And the thing is people are really getting tired of this shit. And it doesn't matter what's, like I said, I'm not bringing politics into it. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle people are on. They're really getting annoyed with this kind of stuff continuing to go on, this blatant disregard for people's privacy and selling data off, just collecting it for no reason, selling it off. And so, like I said, we'll see legislation coming forward at some point. And then other countries, spelled that counties, it should be countries. Other countries are also following suit. There are a few pieces of legislation that are in progress right now. Like this one is the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, or something similar. This is a Canadian law. There's a few other countries that are working on their own privacy laws, and there is some stipulations to this stuff, which I will get into here shortly. In data brokering, it seems like it is finally being targeted by a lot of this legislation. Now, for those that aren't familiar with what I'm talking about when I say data brokering, here is an example of what I am talking about. So let's say that each of these circles represents a different business. Now, let's say you as the consumer over here, and I guess I'll just do this because this is turning into a process here. Well, let's say you as a consumer over here are doing business with private company or a business number one. And let's say this is business 2, business 3, business 4, and so on. Now, you as a consumer dealing with this kind of stuff, but you as a consumer over here go over to company number 1. Let's say it's some sort of an online merchant store. You want to purchase like a protein powder or something like that. So you go to their website, you sign up, you make an account. So they have to collect certain piece of information in order to be able to ship out the product to you. So things like your name and address, and then they also collect phone number, email, so they can send you a bunch of marketing shit. And so what they do is they build out this entire profile. Now, what these guys do is what they usually will do is have like marketing agreements, or they'll sell the data off to other places. Maybe a data broker will call them, or they broker this data off to other companies for other companies to go sell shit. So let's say this is a protein powder company, and they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe they'd want sports drinks. So this is a sports drink company. So they sell your data off here. And then they sell data off over here to a company that sells supplements. And they sell data off down here to some sort of, let's say, a clinic that provides some sort of someone that does health services. Now, what happens here is, so in this case, then these companies come along and then they start blasting that person. This is why people will get random phone calls and random text messages from companies that they've never done business before. So then these companies start reaching out to you and they're like, hey, you want to buy our shit? We got stuff that we want to sell you, and they won't tell you that they got your private information from this company over here. They'll just start blasting you with offers. And then what happens here is you have this entire other section of things going on over here where all these other adjacent businesses, they could be related or not related to whatever the original product is that you bought. And then these guys go sell your data off over here to all of these companies. And then of course, all these companies start sending you shit. Again, this is why you get a bunch of random emails, random phone calls, random text messages from companies that you've never done business before, because what they're doing is they're selling your data off to other companies. Now, the Europeans were like, we're getting tired of this shit. And so that's why there's things like the GDPR, because GDPR cracks down on stuff like this. And when it is enforced, which they do enforce it, it's just not to the extent that I think that it scares a lot of companies off from doing this kind of stuff, but they're getting there. But it got to a point where they were just fed up with this kind of shit going on. And we're finally starting to see that with stuff here in the state side. So when you see laws like this come into play, so the CCPA or CPRA as it is now is designed to cut down on stuff like this because it puts penalties in place when businesses are going and doing this kind of stuff. So here's what these laws are actually useful for, and there's some downsides or some stuff that they don't actually cover. We'll get to that here pretty soon. So it's supposed to be a crackdown on data collection. Now, to an extent, this stuff works, but to an extent, it doesn't really do a whole lot. So I've made videos talking about the Facebook ad engine, for example. Facebook has probably the first, if not the first most, the second most powerful ad engine in the world. Them and Google are pretty much tied. They know more about their customers than or their users than any other company out there does. Especially Facebook. I would say Facebook is number one. Anyone that's ever done anything related with Facebook advertising knows what I'm talking about when I say that. And what they do is they have a massive data collection engine. One of the things that I've talked about with Facebook is they have something called the Facebook tracking pixel. Now, a lot of websites use this. So if you ever go to a lot of websites, you'll see this. If you pull up the uBlock origin, you can click on the uBlock origin button and pull up a list of things that get blocked on websites. Typically, two things that you'll see on websites that are really common. If you don't see them both, you'll almost always see one or the other, is the Google Tag Manager or the Facebook tracking pixel. Now, the Google Tag Manager is very similar to the Facebook tracking pixel, and you can actually link those two together. And what they do is they collect a massive amount of information. So here's what the Facebook tracking pixel does for the people that aren't aware of this. Let's say you go to Facebook and you're looking around on stuff on there, and you're not using things like uBlock Origin or hardened Firefox or the Mullvad browser. Let's say you're just using plain vanilla Chrome, for example, which is one of the worst things that you can do for your privacy when it comes to using a web browser. And so you're browsing around on Facebook and you're like, oh, okay, well now I want to click off Facebook and go check out some other sites. The Facebook tracking pixel is there in the background and it pays attention to all of the other websites that you are visiting. And so when people talk about, there certainly is a case to be made for them always listening. You know, like if you have the Facebook app installed on your phone, that's a whole separate discussion. I've already covered that. But so if when you're going and visiting all these different websites, is the Facebook tracking pixel is hoovering up, okay, well, he visited this website. Here's what he clicked on. Here's what this person is interested in. Then they send that data back to Facebook because then anyone that's making ads on Facebook can make ads targeting people with specific interests. It is an entire interconnected web. I don't think people understand that have never worked with this kind of stuff, how strong they have built this system to be. And when I'm talking a web, I mean things like all of these different data points. If these are data points and websites that you're visiting, all of these things are all connected together when you're using things like the Google Tag Manager and the Facebook tracking pixel. All of this data gets shared between all these different places, and they do that to make money. And people are getting frustrated and pissed off with this kind of stuff because they're like, well, you're making money off of me. You're not giving me a route to delete my data. You're taking the decision to help me remove any stuff that's out there about me out. And like, if you're going to use things like Facebook, I think that pretty much everyone at this point should accept the fact that you are the product when you're using stuff like that. They just collect a bunch of data. It's the way it is. The problem is that you can embed the Facebook tracking pixels on websites, but even people that do not have a Facebook account, let's say you never visit Facebook, you don't have an account there or anything like that. If someone has a Facebook tracking pixel, what that tracking pixel is able to do is see everything that you're clicking on these websites, every single page that you're visiting, every single thing that you interact with, every single button that you click on. People that think I'm full of shit about this, by the way, you can go watch videos covering the Facebook tracking pixel in depth. It's a big thing with marketers and marketing. So someone that even never uses Facebook, if they are not blocking this kind of stuff, is Facebook can still build out a profile of these people. And then what will happen is someone will download the Facebook app on their phone, and to be able to use it, you have to give permission for them to access things like your contacts. It pulls off that contacts list, gives that to Facebook. So someone else is doing this that you're friends with and they have a Facebook account. Now Facebook has tied your phone number, your name, where you live, all this kind of stuff. They've tied it to all of these websites you visited. Like I said, I think people are, if you're watching this video, you're getting a pretty good understanding of where it is that I'm going with this. This is just a ridiculous, massive system that they have set up. Now, everyone at this point is trying to get a piece of the pie these days because there is a lot of revenue with targeted ads. For people that have watched my videos before, they probably already know what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway for all the new people that are here. On average, so this is why your data is worth so much money. On average, it depends a little bit on the person, depends a little bit on the country, but the stats I looked at, I believe, applied to people here in the US, that the average US consumer online spends $5,000 to $7,000 every year. That includes that money at places like Amazon or individual merchant stores or things like that. That is worth a lot of money because then what happens is these companies say, well, we want to target ads to these people. We don't want to show ads to everyone because then we're paying a bunch of money to show ads to people that aren't going to buy our stuff. We want to show it only to people that want to buy our specific product. Then what happens is these companies realize that places like Facebook and Google caught on to that, and they're like, oh, we can charge a lot of money. Instead of people paying advertise, because now advertisers want to do a lot more business with us, instead of, so for Google PPC campaign, by the way, pay per click, is your ads get shown on a Google search. So if someone searches Google for, let's say, plumbers in Connecticut, for example, plumbers inside of whatever town, and then it shows a list of plumbers and you can have the added there at the top. Now, what these ad systems are designed to do, because they've hoovered up all this data, is they can target specific customers. And what happens is, instead of Google being able to charge 20 or 30 cents per click and have a bunch of people click on it that aren't going to buy anything, and then it pisses off the business because they're like, we spent a bunch of money on ads and we didn't see a return, is then they're spending $10 to $20 per click. And by the way, that can go up to $100+ depending on how much companies want to spend. $100+ per click. This isn't even someone that's buying anything from this company. They just click on the link to go to that website. This PPC costs can be absolutely insane. So there's a ton of money in that. Now what's happening now is everyone has figured this out. And so everyone is putting this shit on their websites. They're collecting these customer forms, then they're going and selling that data off to other companies. Hey, this person bought these products from us. This is what they're interested in. We will sell this data to you for this price. And then that company's like, oh, okay, well, so they're interested in buying this stuff. Okay, here's what we're going to pay you for that data. I'm sure people now are really getting a pretty good picture of what's going on behind the scenes with all that kind of stuff. Now, this is fortunately a move towards being able to control what data is held about you. So if you are in California right now, or if you are in the European Union, some of these laws, actually, all of these laws are taking effect by now. There might be one or two that are about to take effect. I think 3 of these took effect June or July of last year. And so what's being done about this is now people are finally being able to have an option. The people that are in these states or that are in the EU is send letters to these companies saying, hey, I want my shit deleted. Or even if you don't want it deleted, you can see everything that they have held on you. And if they don't comply, like if they don't delete your stuff or anything like that, again, this is the way it is in the EU. I don't know how it is in the states that are setting this stuff up, but you can get a hold of an enforcement organization or like a government group that will help you out and take care of this. And like the EU, for example, levies some pretty steep fines. They aren't steep in the grand scheme of things, like for companies like Facebook, but it does affect some of the large but smaller businesses. So that is a good thing, like we're getting there. And then some of the adjacent issues are finally being fixed. So things like email spamming. Now, some of this is being done at a legislative level. Some of it has been sitting around for a while. So like ICANN, for example, is a organization. So like if you send out marketing emails, for example, you are required to put an unsubscribe button at the bottom of emails. This does not, so there's 2 different types of emails that you could, well, multiple types of emails, but the 2 that I'm going to use for this example would be, so marketing emails, so things like, hey, here's our newest products if you want to buy them. It's like a mass email. The one thing that you will see is sometimes I see this because people will send me emails trying to buy stuff. I had a company here recently that said, hey, would your business like to buy these water bottles? It looked like a personalized email. So personalized emails aren't part of that. But then there's some other stuff that's coming up with this. Like there were a few companies that got together and they said, you know what, we're getting tired of our service being used for all this garbage. I made a video on it about a month ago talking about how people sending cold emails need to get their stuff dialed in because this is being cracked down on a lot, and a lot of emails and domains are going to start getting blacklisted if they don't start taking corrective action to fix the garbage that they're sending out. So we're seeing some adjacent issues coming up that is kind of being fixed. And then it's also making enough of a patchwork. I don't think this is so much a thing here in America yet as much as it is for the EU. Now, this is a big thing in the EU, and we'll see this here in America at some point. So when I say things like you're seeing companies on a regular basis, so you can take a look at the news like every month, like 23andMe was an example of a recent one of a company that got hit. And when I was looking through the articles and seeing how they had their security practices set up, they were complete garbage. But it doesn't surprise me because I've also talked about how the suits at these companies see cybersecurity as a cost, and because until the day that it gets legislated or the insurance companies force them to do this kind of stuff, force them to have a cybersecurity team, force them to not do dumb shit like have an Excel file with plain text passwords on there, that we're going to see this kind of stuff. But like in the EU, for example, there's an entire section of like when businesses set this stuff up, there's an entire, like, I guess you could call it like an audit section or a regulation. So in cybersecurity, there's a specific domain called GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. So like if you're in the EU, for example, if you're an EU company, people need to actually be making sure that they have stuff in compliance with the GDPR. So certain types of data protection, cybersecurity stuff that's set in place. And we will see this eventually take place in the US when enough of these laws get passed, because any business, any of the bigger businesses are likely going to be doing business in multiple states, which means they would be responsible for protecting the data of these consumers. And so we'll start to see more regulatory requirements put on them in that aspect, but also from the insurance company perspective, because a lot of companies here in the US are like, well, we need insurance. You know, like if you're Amazon, for example, I don't know what their business insurance costs every year. I'm sure it's a lot of money and there's a lot of stuff that they have to comply with. But a lot of these, so like people that have done IT work knows that there's a lot of times insurance companies have a specific set of IT practices that they require to be in place before they will insure a business that's doing whatever type of business it is that they're doing. And so what'll happen is through a patchwork of things like legislation and these insurance companies is they will eventually force this kind of stuff on these businesses like, hey, you know what? The way you guys are handling this stuff is completely off base. You need to get this fixed. So there's some stuff moving forward, and like I said, we're coming up on the caveat here. So as far as keeping up to date on the things that are going on, one of the things that I recommend for people to do is to go to the privacy subreddits, r-privacy. That's a pretty good way to keep up. That's how I just keep up on like general privacy stuff. If you want to find stuff that goes really in depth on a particular topic, not just privacy, but really anything, typically there's subreddits out there that go through like specific domains of things. So like r/netsec is really all about network security, whereas r/cybersecurity is kind of like the overarching part of cybersecurity. And there's a lot of IT employees that are part of that group. There's a lot of good threads in there, but r/privacy is a pretty good way to keep up on stuff that's going on in the privacy community. Now, when I say there is some serious incongruency with legislation and some things are getting much worse, here is what I mean when I say that, because there's always got to be a caveat to this kind of stuff. So all of these laws here, well, I'm not super familiar with the details of the GDPR. I know this applies to private companies. Now, in the case of the United States, these apply to private companies. These do not apply to governments. Again, I'm not going to get political, and this is a huge rabbit hole, but what we're saying is okay, well, there's all of this legislation going into effect to help people's privacy from the business side of things, but things on the legislative front are not looking so good. So let me give you some examples. So the European Union, for example, recently passed the Digital Services Act, or the DSA. There's articles out there that go through all the details of it. Now there's two sides to it. So earlier up here I mentioned that the European Union is working on fixing things like the cookie consent notices. This is one of the things that's being fixed in the Digital Services Act, where the GDPR, the legislators for this were like, okay, well, these cookie consent notices are a bunch of garbage. I'm sure people have seen this, at least the EU users, or if you use a VPN to a European country, and then you get those pop-up notices that are like, hey, and then some of them, I'm sure people have noticed that instead of having an accept button or a reject button, is that it will say accept all, or there will be a little hyperlink that says manage cookie preferences, and you have to dig through options in order to be able to turn off the cookie collection and all of the data collection that goes on when you're on these websites. Like, they bury it and they make it a pain in the ass, and that is not how the EU law said that this stuff, like, it wasn't acceptable in the first place, but the EU had to go back and fix the legislation to really be explicit about this to fix it. So that's a good side of the Digital Services Act. Now, there's a bad side to it. So, for example, any sites, so the Hub and X videos fall under this. So, sites that serve up adult content and have 45 million monthly users or more are subject to this specific section of the DSA that says, okay, if people are trying to access adult content, they have to provide ID to prove that they are of legal age to access the website. Now, there's obviously a huge privacy issue with that because in these companies, so the Hub, for example, would get millions or tens of millions of people's driver's licenses or passports or however it is that they're collecting these pieces of data to see, okay, well, they're of age, but then they have access to this, or they use a third party to verify the identity, and then the third party has access to this kind of stuff. That's a huge privacy issue, and I don't understand why they would think that's okay. That's not helping people's privacy, and it's going to make issues of people's identity getting stolen, things like that, a lot easier when people are uploading. Then what happens when there's a data breach and all these driver's licenses and passports get leaked out? So there's that issue of it with legislation. So it's doing some good and some bad. Now, the other thing with legislation, I'll talk to things on the state side of things here. So stateside, what we're seeing is these individual states are doing things. Now, if you take a look at what's going on with national legislation, this has been in talks for a while, and it's came up again here in the last week or two, is the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA for short. This is going through US Congress right now. Now, what this law would do, I don't know all of the details specifically off the top of my head. I just read briefly about the law to see what was going on with it. Is it would allow individual state attorneys general to be able to restrict access to pieces of the web that they don't want to have people have access to, and would also set up things like digital ID to make sure, okay, well, this person wants to access the Hub and they need to provide ID to make sure that they are who they say they are. It would set up a system that would allow the attorneys general to say, okay, for our state, we are going to allow people to access these parts of the website, but we don't want them to access these parts of the website. And it sets things up to restrict access to information that the uniparty deems that they don't want people to have access to. It's a huge issue, and it seems like a lot of Congress is on board with this. So while there might be legislation cracking down on private companies doing this, it is getting worse on the government side of things, where the government is saying, okay, well, rules for thee, but not for me. We're going to really start collecting your data and restrict what it is that you can do. So there's that aspect to it. And by the way, I recommend people read up on KOSA and what the implications are going to be if that law does get signed in. I hope it doesn't. I doubt it will. We have seen variations of this come through Congress in the past, but they keep trying to push it through, and at some point it might actually stick and it might get passed, and that would be an issue. As far as the European Union goes, there's one other thing I want to mention there. So the European Court of Human Rights just recently ruled that weakening encryption and putting in backdoors on encryption is unacceptable. Now, this applies to 47 different European countries. It does not, so that includes countries that are outside of the EU. So that includes countries like the UK. For those that are not familiar, the UK here last summer wanted to push legislation through that would have forced companies to weaken and put in backdoors for their encryption. There was some other stuff that went along with it. This was just one aspect of it. But they wanted the encryption weakened so they could see what was going on. And so companies like Signal and WhatsApp are like, okay, well, if you're going to pass this and try to hold us to this, we're just going to pull out of your country and no one's going to be able to access this. So this ruling by the European Court of Human Rights should restrict any kind of stuff like that going on by saying that, no, it's not acceptable to backdoor encryption. And now this is going to be a constant battle back and forth for the people that are new, that are coming into the privacy scene, that are new to this. This is none of what I'm talking about here. None of this back and forth, this fight to try to gain privacy and then companies and governments trying to take it away. And it's this back and forth. This has been going on for years. This is nothing new. If you've been in the privacy scene for the last year or two and you're like, I don't really like seeing some of the stuff that's going on, it's nothing new. It's a constant battle. And that's why it's important for people to stay up to date on this stuff. And it's why I push things like people really need to be encrypting their shit, encrypting your hard drives, using full disk encryption, using something like a VPN, or Tor or some sort of an onion protocol. There's different stuff out there. I'll make videos on the onion routing stuff later because there's more than just Tor available. But using something like that, because if you don't use your rights, you lose them. It's unfortunate to say, but such is the way that these governments operate, it seems like. And then what you can do for education, so like I said, just going to something like r/privacy, looking through threads on there, that will keep you up to date as far as education. Just watching videos like this or videos talking about here's how you turn on full disk encryption for your hard drive, things like that. Just you don't need to flood yourself with this stuff. Just do like a couple videos a week, 1 or 2 videos a week would be plenty. And that will keep building up your education so that you are better prepared to deal with this kind of stuff as these problems keep showing up. And it also just helps you in general by keeping your stuff secure from just random people that are trying to cause issues. And then when I said keeping up with developments, this is just more of like news stuff. So like the r/privacy. So for example, what happened with Skiff. So I made a video not too long ago talking about like private email services. Proton Mail is an example of one. Skiff was an example of one. A newer service, caught a lot of traction in the community. Some people really liked it. Some people didn't because from what I was reading on some of these threads, now I have never used Skiff, but I was seeing some conflicting opinions on what some people thought of the product or the service. Now they announced here recently, it was just a week or 2 ago, that they are merging with Notion. Now I like Notion, it's a good second brain. The issue with Notion is there's a huge privacy issue with it. I don't know if they fixed this since the last time I tried using it, but for example, like you could upload images to your second brain inside of Notion. And if you had the link, if the link somehow was shared with someone else to an image, didn't matter whether or not they were logged into your account, they could look at like specific images that were uploaded to your Notion. And Notion is a for-profit company that collects a lot of data. They've got their own AI system built in with their own LLM, stuff like that. So for Skiff, a company that said they were all about privacy, to go and merge with Notion, it's like, okay, well, what the fuck kind of bullshit is that? But this kind of stuff happens. And the only way that you're going to be able to deal with it, the only way that you're going to be able to know about it is by keeping up with this kind of stuff. Anyway, this video was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but there's a lot of details as always. I'm sure people that come to watch Ken Harris videos are not here for a 5-minute rush through video on something. I like doing these in-depth, detailed discussions on things. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, as always, just go and drop a comment down below. I appreciate the support as always. Got tons of new support lately, and things are going really well. I've got lots of good content planned and coming up. With all that being said, appreciate you watching this far, and I will see you on the next video.